Welcome back to the Careful Practices podcast. I'm Ryder Fox, here today with Ash Parker. This podcast is for people who envision a more caring world, who are generous and uplift others' agency, who are fed up with the systems that be, and dedicated to a more intentional care practice. If that sounds like you, welcome. We're so glad you found us. And hey, if you're still figuring out if this space even resonates with you, we get that. We're just so excited to have all of you join us as we reflect, learn, have these deeply honest conversations with each other, and practice the care that we really desperately want to witness in this world. In this full-length episode, Ash and I are exploring inspired care. What helps us to feel inspired? How do we foster inspiration in our care practices? And what are some ways that we navigate care in the times that we don't feel inspired? Before we dive into today's full-length episode, I'd love to share just a few ways that you can practice care with us today. First, a huge thank you. Every time that you like, subscribe, and share, you fuel our work. And because of you, we're able to donate over 5 times our sales from our services directly back into community care every single quarter. If you're looking for community, Stronger You and Thrive Lifeline host free, welcoming Discord spaces and peer support meetings. We also have free downloadable self-help resource guides that you can use anytime. If you prefer personalized support, then we offer paid individual and group coaching. In fact, our registration is now open for the Fall Dissociative Care Circles. Head over to the coaching tab under services on our website to grab your spot. And hey, if you're a practitioner growing your own non-carceral care spaces, then our courses and workshops are always open. Save the date for our next non-carceral harm reduction seminar, which will be held on Sunday, September 20th. You can sign up under the workshops and trainings tab. And finally, if you're tired of feeling like you're too much, struggling to get your shit together, or just trapped inside of trauma spirals, you're not alone. On September 21st, we're launching Getting Unstuck. This 12-week program will break down exactly how systemic marginalization impacts our bodies and will give you trauma-informed tools to move forward. If you're looking for ways to connect with the cohort weekly and specifically implement your practices for realigning your life with your collective needs, then you might want to check out our specialized Realign cohort within the 12-week Getting Unstuck program. All of our offerings feature sliding scale pricing to fit your budget. You can find every single link right now in our show notes. And with that, let's get back into the episode. In today's episode, we are going to talk about suicidality and our work with chronic suicide survivors. We will not be sharing graphic details. Please take care of yourselves however you need to. All right, let's chat about inspired care. Hi Ash, how are you today?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Anything new in your world?
Not really. I made some very good pizza the other day, but that's about it.
Oh, nice. What kind of pizza?
Sausage and sauerkraut.
Ugh, I love sausage sauerkraut pizzas so much. I especially love the brat kind of sausages with the stone ground mustard flavor. It's my favorite.
Yes. That was quite good. What about you?
I got another piercing the other day, and I was able to get this little tri-petaled stud that has the trans flag colors in it. And so next to the nose ring that I now have this little trans flag, and it's really cool.
That is delightful.
I'm digging it. So I've been thinking about how the last several weeks we've been talking about a lot of the harder stuff in care. And I think that that's because it's the kinds of questions that we hear a lot. And it's also what we see in mainstream a lot. People are worried about burnout. They're worried about the situations that cause them a lot of fear and not knowing if they're going to care, quote unquote, right, if they're going to do something that would harm somebody. So there's a lot of that harder, darker stuff that can underlie a lot of the conversations that we have in care. But I haven't heard in mainstream the idea that care is something that we embody and actually brings us to life. So I'm thinking today that we might spend a little bit more time talking about the ways that care inspires us and actually how we align toward inspired care practices that bring us joy and help us discover more things in life rather than feel like they are extracting more out of us in a laborious type of way.
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation because I feel like so often people are worried about like my capacity to do things, or like I'm doing too much, I'm giving too much care, and it's like solely this like you give care and therefore you burn out kind of relationship. And I think it's a lot more complicated than that. Like, yes, there are ways that I give care that are extractive to me, and there's a lot of ways that I give care that feel very inspired and like help me live and help me find joy. So I'm excited for this conversation.
I love it. I love sitting in the nuance and finding the other side of things. So I appreciate you having this conversation with me. And I think that it's fun to talk about how fun care can be. So thank you for having that fun conversation with me.
Absolutely.
So getting us started, I'm wondering if there are some examples of care that is inspired in your life, and if you want to share what drew you to any of those forms of care.
I think it's so many little things. Like, I guess, like, thinking about this question, some of the things that come to mind are just like, my friend got top surgery last week and being able to be there with them for it. Like, I was there for their surgery. I was helping them with their recovery. And like, it's beautiful to be able to share that experience together because I know exactly how much it means to them. And I am super excited for them. And like, sure, it's labor and like showing up, going to appointments, helping them like bathe, take care of themselves. But it's also like joyful and connective. And like, I want to be able to do that with people in my life. And like, sort of similarly to that, like making dinner for people that I love, like, sure, that's also like labor, and I've certainly done that in ways that feel like very obligatory and I have to do the thing, but it's just like, oh, like I want to make this like fun meal for us and we're going to share it together and it's going to be nice, and it's like a thing that I can do, and I'm grateful to like have people in my life where I can do that with them, and I haven't always had that. And I think in some ways this feels like, oh, just like be grateful for the things that you have, which like it's more complicated than that, I think. But just being present inside of the moments where I'm giving care and like enjoying that connection with people and enjoying the life that I am working to build for myself are things that feel inspiring.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think that there's a lot to this that you're speaking to that brings intimacy and deepens connection, and it allows somebody to feel cared for, but it also allows you to feel connected into something that's meaningful and into the presence of another human or into a moment that you get to share together. And so that moment's imprinting on both of you, and you're coming through that feeling a little bit more together and a little bit more whole as whoever you are, you know, with the people that you're giving care, whether it's another person, it's nature, it's a whole collective, but you're creating that shared memory together. And I think that really imprints on us in powerful ways that I like to think about it as a woven tapestry that we're just continuing to create, and it really weaves the fabric of that tapestry so tightly and so beautifully. And there's something so special to being able to come back to those moments as we create the memories together, but also to foster intimacy with each other, to foster vulnerable spaces that we can share collectively. I think that there's something in that care that brings life to us, and that it's so much less about the outcome of the care or the thing that was provided in care, and so much more about that shared moment or that way that we have been able to connect and to create together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of my early care practices were similar to what you're sharing. I just wanted to be there in ways that people really needed and create or be a part of or be alongside them in ways that they felt isolated or uncared for, or like a need couldn't be met. And if I could fill that gap in any kind of way, then it was so meaningful to me. And So I can relate to a lot of that. I also have been drawn to sitting in the depths and the really hard things and the taboo subjects and having the conversations, naming the things, being inside the real feelings of it rather than skirting them or dismissing them or trying to make them look more bright or positive or colorful in some kind of way. And so really sitting inside that depth has been a huge part of my inspired care practices more, as I've aged in life and been able to name those things in my own life and then sit in them with others. But I've noticed more and more recently that more than just sitting in the depths, I have evolved to this place where I really want to be intentional about carving out our pathways toward things that get us unstuck. I don't want to stay stuck inside the darkness. I don't want to never be able to witness other aspects of our truths and our realities and our co-creative capacities. And so I think something that I have been really reflecting on a lot in my own personal evolution is how care evolves too. And with me, as I'm evolving, younger me wasn't able to name the dark things. So my ways of caring for people was just being there in, setting a book club, being someone that made dinner and brought people over, have game nights, have movie nights. And I still love doing things like that. I love to have community spaces where we can just be people together in a shared way. But later, as I started naming and grappling with some of those harder truths that I wasn't allowed to or didn't have any language for, then it became very important to me to care in ways that we can just sit in the hard stuff and just feel it. And then as that started to process and move through me, then it's become less about just sitting in the stuff and really moving that stuff through me and helping others. Now that's something that I want to do in my care practices, is how do we collectively move those things through us? How do we collectively recognize how we can be in the darkness and then use that to tell us how we want to carve out the pathways or create the care, create the way where there didn't seem to be a way, or whatever it is that we're doing, and get unstuck from that. And so that's something that has, when I think about inspired care, I've thought a lot about how has my care evolved, and then how have I evolved alongside that. And in so doing, my care practices have evolved, and the people that I support and the ways that I support them has also evolved. And so it feels so much like a circle of collectivism in that aspect that I've really kind of come to recognize. Some other things that I've really enjoyed more recently are being able to discover alternate truths and really practice holding multiple truths at once. I think that this is just a part of who I am, very, very distinctly, having many, many me's, but there's something that is more intentional and safer about it as I've evolved. And I know how hard it is for many of us in society to have multiple truths, multiple experiences, to sit inside the nuances of things. And so it's been a really beautiful practice to be able to provide care that witnesses the multiplicity and invites that in, and also bears witness in a way that helps other people to become comfortable with their own multiplicity or their own complex truths, and find a place that has resonance rather than crisis moments. I think a lot of our communities experience the nuance and the complex truths as gut-wrenching oppositional pulls that become crises. And so how can we sit in the moment of complexity and find comfort in that, or find enough peace that we can get through that moment and continue to become who we are becoming. I love discovering and practicing new perspectives, incorporating those into my life. That's been true all of my life. I think that it just becomes enriched as I age, but I wanted to really speak to the discovery process itself, because I don't think that we think of discovery as care, but some of my most incredible care moments have been girded around this idea of discovery and co-creativeness. Because if we are inspired toward things that help us feel like we're learning something we didn't know, help us feel like there's possibility. It's really dreaming together. How can we purpose toward envisioning a more caring world? How can we co-create? How can we discover how our dreams could be realized in real life, and then put that into practice in tangible ways? And so I think that the discovery itself is a really beautiful care practice that I would not have recognized as a younger person as an aspect of care. And then finding and being inside the small moments. You were talking about this too. I think that this is really troubling for me because a lot of dismissive care practices will tell people to just think of the things that bring them happiness, or to just, it's toxic positivity, right? It's just move from sadness into happiness. And that's not what I mean. I mean, in the depth of my darkness, I can look up and my dog is making the most loving eyes at me. And I've never felt more loved in my life because this dog is seeing into my soul and witnessing me in a way that I don't even know if I've been witnessed by another human being. I can't even put language on that. It doesn't make any sense, but it is moving if I let it be, and it's connective, and it's meaningful to me in a way that I feel more whole as a person. And that is a care practice, right? Being able to sob and look next to me and see, the sunlight, see the grasshoppers moving, see the lake and all of its waves and glory, and the multiple patterns that happen, the nature that's all surrounding it, whatever. There are so many things in those moments that remind me that I can bring those moments into my darkness with me. I don't have to just visit them or, think about a happy thought and be transported into happiness. Having a way to bring those moments in and share simultaneous darkness and hope, or darkness and beauty, or darkness and joy, or just anything else that is simultaneously existing in that space, has allowed those moments to stretch out in peace rather than to feel like an endless amount of suffering. And so I think that has been something that I've really purposely practiced with others in the last several years of my life, and I've seen it change all of us. And so it's really meaningful to me, and I appreciate you bringing that up as well. And I think just these kinds of conversations, that we are caring for each other as we are also modeling care for others, having conversations, having dialogue about embodied care practices. So as an example, just with our Saturday coaching sessions, we invite care practitioners from all walks of life to sit with us on Saturdays, and we have different activities, different topics that we discuss, and then we practice these more nuanced situations where we're not sure how to support somebody, we're not sure how to be inside that sacred space with them because it feels complex, it feels really nuanced. And I was able to develop this new practice for us that helped the folks that were attending to really embody sacred space with each other. And it opened up such vulnerable and human conversations. And there's something that's just powerful to that, because when we embody ourselves, when we embody care, and when we embody collectivism, it changes us, and it really makes care go from something that is an act that I do, and almost like, here's a rock I'm throwing in your window, feel cared for, versus let's just hug each other and sit inside that embrace, and you can feel the care coming from me. I didn't do anything for you, nothing. You don't walk away with a rock to hold in your hands, but you feel embodied. You feel like there was a space that two people embodied, and there's just something about that really elevates care, and I think it helps extend the way that we are able to feel cared for, and the way that we are able to continue a practice of internal co-regulation and then returning to a space of co-creative care later.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to a couple of the things you mentioned, like with the sitting in the depths of hard things. This is, I think, absolutely something that I've found inspiring as well. And like, I think that there's ways that it can be pushed on me as an obligation or as an urgency where there are consequences for me not being on the other side, in which case it doesn't necessarily feel so inspiring. But there's also times where it just feels like a gift to be able to be in these conversations with people. And it's something that I want for myself. I want to be able to talk about the hard things, the stigmatized things. And like Ryder was saying too, in like purposing towards carving out new supportive pathways or getting unstuck, like I think for me, having the conversations has helped me to do that. But in the times where I am then expected to always be available for said conversations, be expected to always hold somebody else's pain and my own, then it starts to feel more obligatory and less inspired. And I think also, like, I am younger. I haven't done this for as many years, and I expect that things will sort of shift as I keep growing and keep having different experiences. And also appreciate you sort of expanding on the finding and being in small moments of joy kind of thing. Like, it's not just, oh, just be happy and forget about the sad. It's not just, oh, romanticize my suffering. It's hold all of the things together. And like, I think even inside of the less inspired care, I can still find moments of connection or moments of learning something about myself. And that's been helpful to like hold on to, while also recognizing that I'm not doing something that I want to be doing.
Of course, I appreciate you speaking to the less inspired care, because we're still going to just be doing things at times. And in one part, I think about this as a practice. For instance, I'm not usually very upset or annoyed by having to brush my teeth twice a day. Sometimes I don't want to do it, right? And I just won't. But typically, because I've brushed my teeth my entire life, if I'm going to bed, I just brush my teeth. It's not extractive. It's not obligatory. It just is, because it's been such an integrated part of my life that it just is my life. It's not, it's a neutral existence, neither obligatory nor inspired, right? And I think about this in doing aligned care, because if I'm practicing alignment by caring or building a care practice around what inspires me, then I am enlivened by the practice, because it continues to help me grow. It continues to help me discover. And there's something in that moving toward inspiration that makes it feel like it's enlivening, not obligatory. It doesn't extract from me. It doesn't make me go, oh my God, I've got to do this again. It doesn't feel like labor. It feels like joy. It feels like discovery. It feels like, wow, I get to do this thing. But over time, it becomes such an integral part of my life. Then when I'm doing it, so if I'm, picking up laundry for somebody, if I'm washing dishes for them, it's just stuff I do in my life. It's just how I be. So it's not an obligatory or extractive thing. So I think in part that no, every care practice will not be inspired forever and ever and ever, but neither does it have to be extractive or laborious. And in the times where it is, I can choose based on my capacity to say, I have an hour that I'm going to give to this really laborious thing, or I have an hour that I'm going to give to this conversation that I know for sure is going to be extractive, but this person needs it and I have the capacity and I can set that aside. And so as we acknowledge that all care we do will not be inspired, I think we also have the greater capacity and the greater understanding to decide, where do I want to lean into inspiration? Where do I want to just do the things that I do that are all integrated into my life? And where do I want to take a little bit of a detour and just give in a way that I know is a little bit outside of, scope right now, but it's exactly how I can meet this person or meet this obligation. And it's not going to be an ongoing, unsustainable practice. It just is something that I can devote into that right now. Yes,
definitely. And I think that we'll keep talking about this throughout the episode, but there's it's definitely not just inspired care and not just extractive care. It's sort of all of these different things. At least that's also how I experience it within my own life. So thank you for elaborating on that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering how you purpose toward fostering this inspired care practice. What are ways that you even know that your practice is inspired? And, how do you lean into that, or how do you curate it in your life?
I mean, I think one of those things is just trying to be present inside of the moments of what I'm doing. Like, anything can be exhausting if I'm just like, I don't want to be doing this thing. I want to just be doing things for myself. I am tired. I want to sleep. Like, whatever. But like trying to sort of intentionally choose to do the things and be present inside of whatever connection I have while I'm doing them has helped that somewhat. Like, of course, there's just going to be things that are extractive, like Ryder was saying. Like, it's not just, oh, look on the bright side and it's good and connective and happy. But that is something that I have done. I think also, like, so much of this is what do I want to do, and not what feels like I need to or I should, or there's going to be consequences if I don't do the thing. So I've really tried to explore what I want, which is an ongoing practice of trying to figure out what that actually looks like. And I think it's complicated too, because like I want the people that I love to be safe and to have their needs met and all of that. But maybe sometimes meeting those needs in that exact moment, in that exact way, isn't actually what I want. And then I have to sort of grapple with that, because that also means that they're not getting those needs met. And then it's not so black and white as just, oh, this is actually what I want. Let me just always align with what I want, because those things end up conflicting because there's multiple people involved. But I'm just trying to explore that. And like, I think also part of the like being present when I'm giving care is understanding how that feels. And like, oh, that just all felt like terrible and exhausting and I don't want to do that again. Or maybe it just felt terrible when I was thinking about doing it, but then actually doing it felt fine. Like trying to understand those better for myself so I can keep better understanding what I want versus what I don't want in a very black and white way. And I think along with that also just practicing saying no to things, even if I'm not really sure. Like sometimes I say no and then I regret saying no because I actually really did want to do the thing, or there are consequences on the other side. But being able to say no leaves me a little bit less paralyzed about the possible consequences of saying no. So I've just been like trying to do that sometimes.
I think a lot of what you're speaking to, I'm realizing I could even step back and say that before I can do inspired care, I have to know what aligns to me. And before I can know what aligns to me, I have to know who I am. And I think that that is a core piece of this puzzle. So I just wanted to speak to that, or name it, that for me personally, a huge part of me is somebody that is just excessively task oriented and servant hearted. And it's core to, a large part of me. And so chopping wood, hauling water, shoveling piles of shit is something that I could do endlessly in a number of ways. And a younger experience of joy for me in doing care was always being in the background doing the things that other people didn't want to do or didn't notice needed to be done, or just keeping structures going so that other people can do the care work, doing all of the administrative things in the background, making sure that everything's running, building programs for people so that they can feel like they know what to do next, helping provide some structure around reflection questions, or around progressive movement patterns and things that would meet them where they are and help them to get toward their goals. All of that kind of stuff is excessively natural to me, and that doing those things helped me recognize that I found joy in those things, and this is a lot of who I am. Leaning into those joys is what helped me to continue to foster that inspired care practice, back in my 20s when I'm still really learning what all of this is about. And over time, I've also had to acknowledge that the downside of leaning too hard into that or defining myself completely, because there are other parts of me too, right? If I only chop wood, carry water, then eventually I am not living into the other parts of myself, and I'm not owning other joys and other evolving into other inspirations that also are aligned to me. And so I think that as we discover who we are, we understand more about what aligns to us, what we are aligned to, and what inspires us. As we lean into that inspiration, that's what I've really written down here, is how do I know what is inspiring me? I lean into every moment. Like you said, the moment to moment, the ones that bring joy, the ones that bring understanding, realization, a sense of well-being, all of those things are things that I can lean into. As I lean into them a little bit more, then I know myself a little bit better. I know other people a little bit better. I foster connection in ways that I say, wow, that connection really feels right. Or I foster connection that doesn't feel aligned. And I recognize, okay, I enjoy this aspect of care, but I want to do it in this way. And so I think that similarly, this is a reciprocal process where we get to know ourselves, we lean into who we are, we do the care that aligns with who we are, and then as we do that, we find more inspiration. As we find more inspiration, we learn more about who we are and who other people are and all of that. So I think that there's a lot of reciprocal growth that can come inside of that. I think that other ways that I lean into this or that I foster inspiration is just my head's buzzing. All of me's are going as soon as I wake up in the morning. And so there's a lot of conversation that could be overwhelming. But as I've learned to lean into the flow of that, then I start to recognize where ideas are inspiring, where understanding's happening. There's a lot of processing that happened overnight. And so something that felt overwhelming the night before has an entire structure built. I'll wake up and write 150 pages because something that I've been grappling with for weeks gets resolved while I'm sleeping, and I just sit down and write an entire program for it. Or I bother someone like Ash, who has to manage the next aspects of the team development, and say, hey, Ash, da 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 da, and then you freak out on me because I have all the ideas and I'm just gonna release them into the flow. But being a little silly, but truly it's leaning into the natural flow of where I'm feeling that buzz, that alertness, that creativity is something that's really helped me to purposely foster care in ways that I can lean in creatively rather than exhaustively feel like I'm required or obligated to do this kind of care work, whatever that is. I think another part that's really important to me is somatic awareness. So really trusting my body mind to show me what is bringing more peace, where I can breathe a little bit better, where I feel co-regulated, things that don't cause my mind to spiral, things that make me feel like there's a hope for the future, or feel like we have something that we can envision together, something we can dream into. Those somatic awarenesses have been really vital for me to understand where inspiration and where alignment are. And so I've really purposely fostered that somatic awareness. And then really looking for aligned people is another part of that, because if you, Ash, or somebody else that I have these conversations with may have a completely different experience of inspiration, but we're having this conversation, we're literally modeling what we do in real life. And so as we have this conversation, you might be coming from a different place, I might be coming from a different place, but we're so inspired by the dialogue that we're sharing that because we are aligned in growth toward inspired care or growth toward collective care, ways that our communities can thrive, we may be coming at it from different places, but by aligning with each other and having this dialogue, we both go away feeling more fulfilled, more aware, more connected to each other and to the collective community, right? And that, I think, helps us to then have that many more ideas, or to feel that much more grounded in the dreams that we have for ourselves and for our community, when it could feel completely hopeless. Instead of walking away feeling hopeless, we walk away feeling even more inspired. And out of that collective alignment, we're able to have the juice that we need, and we're able to have the ideas that help us, make one more positive step or one more aligned choice in the care that we are providing, rather than burning out and doing things that just feel completely isolated and unsustainable.
Yeah, I think the aligned people and aligned conversations is something that's been really helpful for me too. It feels harder to like talk about concretely, but just being able to talk about things, being able to be felt, being able to have the inspiration, the hope, the belief that there is something in this world that is not just like awful and terrible. That's definitely been helpful for me. And I also completely agree with what you said initially about like, in order to figure out what inspires us, like we have to know what is aligned to us. And I think it's still something that like I'm trying to figure out, and that's also like changing. Like I think when I was younger, like part of the reason that I started volunteering with Thrive is that I wanted to just be able to have conversations about suicide and about all of the hard things that like I experienced in my life and couldn't talk about with anybody. And I think like just being able to have those conversations was inspiring and was so needed in my life. And now I'm like, I super appreciate having those conversations, and I think I need something a little bit more or a little bit different, and I'm sort of trying to figure out what that is. And so that's just been interesting, and I think that it's sort of just this ever evolving relationship with what is aligned with us and what is inspiring.
Yeah, this goes back to what I said earlier, but just tying all of this together, it's something that I've really been reflecting on as I prepared this conversation today, that the care that inspires us the most is often somewhere that we are growing into, somewhere that we feel called to in relationship, in with others, with ourselves, with the world around us, whatever that is. There's a purposeful evolution that we are becoming ourselves a little bit more. If we are feeling inspired, it's an invitation to become ourselves, I think. And the more that I lean into that, the more not only am I giving care, yes, I am having this conversation. Like you said, if I'm having a conversation about suicide with somebody who is in a crisis, then that is healing for them. Hopefully it's a space of care that I'm offering and truly genuinely offering. But at the same time, like you said, it's somewhere that I'm growing because I'm getting comfortable with having this conversation, or because I'm getting to have conversations that I didn't get to have other places. And so I think that it's a simultaneous care for selves and care for others. It's not just a blinders on, I cease to exist and I provide care experience. If I'm leaning into the inspired care, then I'm doing the things that help each other and also help me to grow. But if I intend toward that practice, if I continue to do it intentionally, like you said, I started with Thrive and I volunteered for this period of time, and then I got really used to having suicide conversations, and then I asked, what else can I do? Because at some point, in my opinion, again, I think that over time, this becomes something where that healing process has happened and you have evolved. You've integrated that conversation around suicidality. You've integrated your skills. And similar to that kind of example of brushing our teeth, it becomes a skill that we have. It's no longer a thing that we need to do in order to connect or in order to grow and evolve. And so I think that what I've noticed in my life, and what I feel you saying and sensing in your own life, is that as we lean into inspiration and then we intention in toward that practice, then that practice itself becomes a skill. And once it's a skill, there's no need to continue developing it. I will use it. I don't want to lose it, but I don't need to put all of my attentions into that space. And so my care is going to evolve. I will go back, grab that skill, use that tool if I need it. But now I'm going to evolve into something that's inspiring me in new and more developed, more advanced ways. And so I think that that's also part of this process I've recognized, where people feel burnt out is often doing the same things that they've always done and it's not working anymore. So then there's that kind of rush of, oh no, it's not working, everything's going to fall apart. Like, yeah, that's a human feeling. I've felt that too. I've absolutely been there. And also that can just be an invitation to evolve. like you're saying, and now I'm looking for more. I'm looking for what's the next inspiration, and that's joyful. It's amazing to get that invitation to grow and to become more of ourselves and more connected to the collective vibe, right? And so I think that there's a beauty in that, but it's also sometimes a space of grief or fear because we don't expect to change so much.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that going back to what I said before about trying to be present in the moment and like understand how I'm feeling about this, like trying to figure out what it's telling me. Like, is it no longer aligned? Is it now feeling extractive where I used to feel inspired? Like, that is real. And I think that that's just a part of growth, like you were saying.
Speaking into that, I know you already talked some about this, but what are examples of care that hasn't been inspired for you, and what's the effect that that has on your life?
I think things that, I mean, are out of alignment with me, which again is complicated and nuanced to figure out what exactly that means. But times where I'm continuously fighting myself or like trying to show up in a way that is so antithetical to how I do naturally show up. Like an example, I guess, that comes to mind is like at work, there's a lot of very clinical and carceral practices that I am supposed to follow, and they don't resonate with me. But I sort of have to because I need my job. So that's not particularly aligned, but I do find ways to connect and be me even inside of that space, even while obeying the boundaries of my work. I think urgent demands are something that often feels not inspired because I have to do the thing. And that doesn't mean that I won't show up and do that. Like, I think the point of this is not never do care that's not inspired, because I think in showing up for each other, sometimes we just have to. And I've certainly shown up for people in crisis or in times where I really didn't want to or done things that I really didn't want to do. Because I also believe in being there for the other person. And I've known that it would be meaningful for them, like Ryder was saying. Like, I have the capacity and I'm going to choose to show up. But like urgent demands, threats on the other side, something that feels obligatory or that there's going to be severe consequences, feels less inspired.
Yeah, this is something that I've sat with a lot in the last decade as I've done care at such larger scales, that I've really had to recognize the difference between what is aligned to my heart and my wishes and my values. Like you were saying, Ash, my value is that nobody is suffering. My value is that our communities thrive. My longing, my belief is that we can do this collectively and help each other. We can show up for each other. But that also requires that we show up for each other. And similar to what you were saying, I've had to recognize what happens when there are a few showing up and others making very urgent demands, making threats if care doesn't look a specific way, if they don't feel supported in exactly a certain way. And I can take my responsibility inside of that and say, have these conversations with our practitioners and really ensure that all of our practitioners are taking responsibility for how they're showing up and providing care that is in alignment and is supportive, that is understanding, that's educated, that is meeting somebody inside the space of trauma, marginalization, and other, stigmatized experiences that a lot of folks don't recognize and don't humanize. And those are the responsibilities that we can take. But I've also had to recognize where the limits of that are and how unfruitful it is and how really it will burn us all out. It will damage all of us if we only respond to demands out of, fear of what will happen, or because we've been threatened and we feel scared of that, or we, are lingering inside of the what ifs. What if I don't meet my values this way? What if if everybody doesn't feel supported on the other side? And it's something that is so painful to have to grapple with and to have to make decisions around, and something that a younger me would have thought we would never need to talk about, because we are all here as community taking care of each other, and we are committing toward each other to do this work that understands the impacts that we have on each other. But I've also had to recognize, because trauma is what it is, because situations are as dire as they are, there's also a lot of that can't recognize impact and shared responsibility, mutual care. And so just really having to sit inside of that has been something that I've had to understand when I think about, where am I doing work that's out of fear or out of obligation, like you were saying. I also, as a younger person who was socialized as a female, I had a lot of care inflicted on me, and this, like, you're my daughter, you're my sister, you're my wife, you are my, fill in the blank. And the lesson there was that I am to submit to everybody else and to be invisible, as well as, the domestic servant. And so as I've aged, I've really had to recognize what's the difference between doing things that I want or don't want, but being able to make a decision and live inside my agency in that, versus where am I being erased from that conversation. And as I get even older, it's my job to place myself, to embody my own yeses and nos, right? But I have had to really grapple with what kind of cuts me out of the picture, what erases my ability to have a yes or a no, to have boundaries, to have contemplation around what is okay for me, what is impactful in a way that's going to somehow negatively impact my life or my well-being or the work that I can do and that kind of thing, versus what is going to be not perfectly balanced, but nothing really is perfectly balanced, and that's not what I'm looking for. And so I can have a lot of yeses that have imbalances in them, and that's completely okay. But as soon as there's not a space for me to have boundaries that are healthy for myself and for my team and those kinds of things, then I have to step back and really embody my yeses or nos in ways that have helped me to really foster mutual commitment and aligned care practices more. I think there's also something that I've really grappled with, and I think you're speaking to this too, that in those urgent demands, there is a expectation, there's a requirement to be met that has to look a very specific way, has to feel a very specific way. And I think that we're all longing for that in some kind of way. We all just want to feel okay. We all just want to feel cared for. We all want to feel helped and loved and, all of these very human, natural needs. But if the care is expected to perform that, and it's not a query or an invitation in how we can co-creatively walk alongside each other and build those practices kind of step by step. So if I'm thinking more about the pathway that we are walking together, I want to take that journey with you. I want to be responsible for walking alongside you and carving out that pathway together, versus being responsible for getting you to the other side of that with no space in between, or for getting you the feeling or the end result without both of us committing to, and truly the person that is going along that pathway is the person most responsible for working those pieces out in their life. And so I can come alongside, I can support all of that, I can help provide structure to it, I can help people query what's the next thing, what's not working, what is supportive, what isn't aligned, what is aligned, and those kinds of things. But I've really had to recognize that if there's only an outcome-based expectation and that somebody is asking for me to fulfill that role, then it's really not in alignment with myself or the work that feels inspiring and aligned with me. And then we've talked a lot about this, but it's really something that I've come to know, that care needs to be able to evolve. And so I used to, like I just said earlier, have this panic of, oh no, now it's changing. Something has changed and it's all broken, and there's a difference in how we're relating, a difference in how this care looks, a difference in how I can show up. I don't feel as motivated anymore, whatever it might be. And that could be really scary. But now recognizing that as natural evolution and an invitation, like you were talking about, for something more. I want to know what's more. I want to discover new things. I want to have practices I never even knew were possible, and then see what happens when I implement those and they become skills in my life. And so at this point, having care that is allowed to evolve is far more aligned with me and doesn't leave me in those feelings of kind of entrapped, constricted places.
Yeah, I agree with all of those too in my own life, and I appreciate you speaking to them more. I think there's more that I want to say, but it sort of goes into the next question. So if we want to go to the next question, then there's more that I'll elaborate on.
All right, then. So what are some ways that you've been able to shift from unsustainable care and into something that's more aligned with you?
I think like this is what you were speaking to with like the ability to have boundaries and to sort of find yourself inside of the care that you're giving. I've tried to make a practice of noticing like where I'm feeling pressured to show up in certain ways, or where I'm afraid of the consequences of not giving care. And like sometimes that's not real. Sometimes that's my trauma and my need to show up perfectly or to make sure that the people that I love don't suffer, and like I can't do that. And sometimes it is real. Sometimes there are very legitimate consequences. Sometimes that consequence is potentially people dying. Like this is the work that I do, and like professionally, and also just I have been that person with many friends and many times in my life. And so I think like recognizing whether those consequences are real and whether it's something that I'm just going to have to deal with, or if it's a place where I can set boundaries or do something differently in the future, is a way that I've navigated a lot of this. And I think like I don't just magically find myself in inspired care the moment I start thinking about it. Like there's a lot of things that I just do because I just kind of have to. I'm just kind of in that position. But I've also like over the course of the past many years, like worked myself towards being in fewer of these relationships or situations where I just have to deal with it because it's the only option, and tried to have more choice, more ability to have boundaries, and then practiced having the boundaries and practiced saying no, because that's hard too. And sort of all of that is a process.
It is. It's so hard to say no when everything inside of you is screaming to say yes, or my heart is deeply, deeply longing for others' suffering to end, or others to feel truly cared for. And I don't want to do anything that will disrupt that feeling of care and comfort and, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, I've had to recognize that if I'm only inside their experiences, then I'm not embodying myself. I'm not embodying my care. And eventually I will be pulled out of my capacities. I'll be pulled into, a vortex that I can't get out of because other people are spiraling. And very naturally, I'm also a spiraler, and I've had to learn how to navigate those times for myself when they are my spirals, but also how to extract myself from others' spirals. And I can be an anchor on the other side of that, but I can't lose myself inside the vortex of somebody else's spiral. And so it's a really, really, really hard thing to grow into, that knowledge, because it feels deeply like letting somebody down and like leaving them inside a storm with nothing. And really what I've had to recognize is I'm right here. I am outside that storm and offering a space to connect and to anchor in. And I can't make the spirals end, but I can be an anchor point that allows an opportunity that is more than just the spiral, and that allows a place of respite in between the storms, and any number of different metaphors. But I can be right there beside, and when we're looking for a way out of the storm, what do we most need? We need something that's outside of that storm that allows us to say, oh, there is an outside of this, And so it's something that I've really had to radically change my perspective on. And it's something that I'm still really grappling with as a human being, because there's a difference in making that declaration or having that revelation, and actually practicing it into my life and recognizing the pain that it causes others when I say no, or when I have met, the scope of practice that I can be inside of. Then it's painful. It's deeply, deeply painful. And at the same time, I've had to understand how to embody myself and my care and trust that others can also, see that and do that with themselves. We are here together. We are aligning in ways that allow folks to align with us and invite that care. But I can't be inside the things that will, take me off of my own capacity, my own center, and those kinds of things. So it's a really difficult thing. And I think if I consider what has really helped me to shift out of unsustainability and into something that's more aligned, it's often what I was just modeling, this extreme grappling, extreme pain. I've not had an experience yet of just waking up in the morning with this inspired, like, oh my gosh, I can just embody care and things will be so much more comfortable for me, and they'll be uncomfortable for a little while for other people, but eventually it will be solid and everybody will live happily ever after. That's never happened. It's never gone that way inside of myself, and it hasn't gone that way when I'm walking that out in real life with real people, because we're all traumatized, we're all hurting, we're all fearing lost attachments, we're all afraid of what's on the other side, we're all afraid of going through this alone, we're afraid of hurting people, or afraid of being too much or whatever. All of us are afraid in some kind of way, at least inside our communities and the work that we do. And so inside of that is a lot of unraveling what is something that is a perspective I need to keep, and what is a perspective that's not serving me. It's just perpetuating the harm. It's perpetuating the fear. It's perpetuating the kind of, I'm not trying to lie to people and promise this undivided, always present love that would allow them to never, ever, 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 ever feel alone in their stuff, because I can't be inside their head 24/7. And there's a lot of people that I work with in some kind of capacity. So I legitimately can't be in that many people's heads that many hours of the day. But if I could, I would. I've learned I can't be. And I've also learned in every way possible to be transparent about the care that I can provide. However, there's something about our work that can be so genuinely felt that it can still leave people with that sense that we'll just be alongside them every step of every way. And, in essence, in spirit, we will, but in actuality, we can't literally be there at that level all of the time. And so it's a really hard balance to try to figure out, how do we not in any way overpromise something or give people an idea that's not accurate, and at the same time, how do we in pulling back into ourselves most wholly, not do that in ways that are rigid or authoritative or being unkind and discompassionate.
I just wanted to say to what you're speaking to around, like, you don't magically wake up and just have inspired care. Like, I think that that's very true. And I think that there are, like, some things that I do or that I engage in that just, like, do feel so inspired. Like, my friend's top surgery, like, that's so joyful. And, like, being able to be present in, like, those kinds of celebrations and, like, just getting together, having dinner, playing games, whatever. Like, these are joyful things that I think we can intentionally bring into our lives that can feel like inspired care. And they require having the relationships to be able to do that with people, and our capacity to be able to do that. And then there's also sort of the more embodied practice of showing up in care in so many different ways in our lives in a more inspired way. And that definitely doesn't happen overnight. So I was just thinking about sort of the differences there and all of the different ways that we can lean into different kinds of inspired care.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, because of our humanity and our real experiences and the complexity of trauma and marginalization and all of the different barriers that we've faced, something that I'm sitting with as I say this is that the opposite of inspiration and inspired care often is not discompassionate or unmotivated care or just doing it because I have to. Really, in my opinion, it's the fears, the grappling, the grief, the growing. As a person, I have to change who I am. I have to take responsibility for who I'm becoming. And that is what both brings me back into a state of greater inspiration. But in that process, it also means that I will grapple with some of the deepest, darkest, saddest things that I ever have. And as an as an adult, I've been an adult for much more of my life than not. But at this stage in my life, I have gained the practice of grief and grappling that allows it to be common, not easy by any means, but I have a very purposeful grief practice, a very purposeful grappling process. And it's not unpainful, it's deeply painful still, but it's not something that I push away. It's not something that I'm afraid to enter. It's something that I recognize as this is my pathway toward change. And then there may be other people that are able to go into inspiration without that painful pathway. And God bless you. I'm so excited that that's your truth. But it hasn't been my truth. It's been something that's very painful. And so one thing I think I would say that if anybody else needs to hear this is being able to do the work of the grieving, of the grappling, of the owning what we want in our world and what we're not seeing and what we wish we could be, but who we just aren't right now. Even if we become that person, right now there's a reason that we're feeling constrained or feeling an impossibility around it. And so as we let that person go, or as we let that ideal go, and we grieve that very purposely and as fully as we can, there is a release that happens in my life, and I've seen this in many people that I've worked with, so I can't again claim it for everybody, but for those of you who are like myself and need to hear this, there is something on the other side that as I let that go, it softens, it releases, and it opens me up into that space of inspiration again. And so in the most painful times, when I am bitter that my world will not be the world I wanted it to be, and I am so angry that we can't just reside in utopia and all take care of each other and not hurt like we do. In those most bitter moments, I've really been able to start to recognize that this is the pathway back into something that will bring even more aligned care, even more inspired understanding. More people will be able to be supported on the other side of this, not because I'm some sort of valiant saint or anything, because I'm aligning with the work that I can actually do, and I'm aligning with the self that I actually am and the person that I'm becoming, as opposed to living underneath this kind of bushel of darkness and just trying to push forward into the thing that I wished would happen. And so just knowing that there is a release on the other side of that the grieving is what helps us to become the person we're becoming. I think that, I wouldn't really truly understand boundaries. I wouldn't truly understand what aligned living looks like if I didn't really, really, really embody the pain of being in a life that doesn't serve me, and in places that don't align with me, in places that aren't right for me, and it's, again, not to exalt or romanticize the suffering, but I've recognized that I can only embody my truth and I can only align into inspired care because I know what it is to not have that. And when I can really truly grieve that and process it, then I can become a person that is open again to inspiration.
Yeah, I think that that's very true, and appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. Thanks for sharing so vulnerably about what it is to connect so richly and how you're discovering the intimacy that you can create and foster with each other, and just how care can become such a way of connecting and healing yourself. I think that that's one of the most beautiful aspects of this idea of inspired care. Before we end today, I'm wondering if you have any advice for folks that are looking to align themselves with a more inspired care practice.
I feel like just things that we've talked about already that I'll just summarize here. Like really trying to explore what does align with you, what are your wants. And I think like what Ryder was just speaking to as well, like that so often that involves a lot of grappling. Like it's not easy to just say what is inspiring, what is aligned to us, because it's not that simple. Like I want one thing, but there's other people involved in that situation, and those wants are not black and white. And so, yes, I want to show up for my friend who's in crisis, and I can't always do that. Or I want to make things different in the world, and there's a lot of ways that I can work towards that, and a lot of ways that aren't aligned with me in working towards that. I think those are sort of simple examples, but I think in any of the places that really matter in our lives, it's not black and white. What is inspired versus not. And so just really exploring that. And I think also just like trying to let there be joy in care. Like I think that we're taught sometimes that care has to be a thing that we're only giving and not receiving. Or that when we're giving care, like it's focused on the other person and not on like my joy, or that like everything is burning down in the world. And so I have to do all of these really hard, exhausting things because that's the only labor that's labor. And we have to do labor to make things different. But I don't think that we have to. Like, absolutely, there's going to be things that are just labor and exhausting. But like the inspiration, the joy that we share with each other is also meaningful. And also makes the lives that help us stay alive.
Yeah, I think that that's key, that so many of us don't recognize that care is caring for us, ourselves, and each other. And when we're doing the things that help us to feel a little bit more whole as people, a little bit less afraid, a little bit more like there's breathing room, a little bit more like there's room to expand, we're not so trapped, then I can do that with one other person, and we can both feel that in really cool ways. And that is a process of intimacy creating. It's co-creating the world that we want to live in, because we're making those moments with each other. And I think that that really is, it's the moment to moment and choosing willfully, not demanding of ourselves, not being the obligatory authoritative person behind us that's saying just you have to do this because if you don't blah 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 blah, you have to build this practice. Not that, just inviting ourselves into discovery and connectedness, and really capturing that next moment where you feel excited about something, and letting yourself be inside that, witness that moment, be inside the experience, and experience the experience that you're having, right? It's so silly, but it is something that has really transformed my life as I've aged, to not just be present in this kind of, I think that the way that the MHIC talks about presence is often really about compliance and comportment, what people look like and if they behave correctly. What I mean is, right now my dog is pressed up against my leg, and if I take just a moment, I can feel the warmth of him, the trust that he has, the softness, the texture of his hair, and just being inside of that, even while I'm talking, is helping me to feel like he loves me and he trusts me. And if he loves me and trusts me and I love him and trust him, then we have created this moment together. And it doesn't matter how I sound. It doesn't matter how I behave. You can't really see how I'm behaving, but it's not about an outcome or an expectation. It's about really sharing this moment with each other. And how can I have more of those moments in my life? And each time that I lean into that, then I'm creating one more moment, and I can find the inspiration a little bit more easily because I'm looking for it, not demanding it, but just open to it. So I think that there's an aspect of discovery where I can watch my voice get excited when I'm geeking out about embodied care practices. And we are really talking about I think a long time ago, Ash and I, you and I had this conversation around how comfortable we can be talking about our suicidality and just normalizing that experience. And I remember a shift taking place in you where I noticed from that point on, you spoke about your suicidality with me very, very openly. And I think that we discovered that moment together in a way that said, it's truly okay to be very honest. Suicidality isn't a past thing. Suicidality isn't just a crisis moment thing. It just is. It's just an existence alongside our lives. And the moment that happened, you started talking to me more and more and more. And then I got to talk to you more, about how we normalize suicidality with the people that we're supporting, and how do we help it be less impactful, because it doesn't have to be scary. It just is. How do we, and from that we've built numerous conversations, numerous support groups, and so just the moment of discovery, if we hear the voice rise in excitement, if we watch our eyes light up or watch each other's eyes light up, right? If we sense a shift in somebody, even if it's grieving, that shift can tell us something that invites us into that sacred vulnerability. And inside those discoveries, we find each other. And when we find each other, we learn a little bit more about ourselves. And I think that it's just that piece by piece by piece, putting those things together, that allows us to say, wait, I know what this feels like now. And next time I'm going to be open to it. Next time I'm going to lean into it, because now I know when it comes, I found it, and I will lean into it that much harder, and I will take it a little bit more expansively. I'll explore it a little bit more purposefully, because now I recognize it. So I think that a lot of this is just opening ourselves to the moment of inspiration or discovery, letting that be joyful for us, and then recognizing how it comes the next time and leaning in a little bit more, and then exploring it a little bit more purposefully. And with each iteration of that, we have more and more capacity to choose what we're inviting into our lives and to choose inspired care.
Yeah, I think that's really well said.
Well, thank you. I've practiced it. I haven't at all. But thank you. Well, anyway, thank you again so much for joining, Ash. And it's always just a pleasure to be able to share the mic with you and talk about embodied care practices in ways that hopefully can help others to embody their own care practices. And for everybody else who joined us today on the Careful Practices podcast, it really is a treasure to share this space with you. And we look forward to having a conversation with you next week.